Paul and Silas were beaten, bleeding, chained at the feet, and thrown into the innermost cell. At midnight they were praying and singing hymns. The other prisoners were listening. Then the earthquake came, the doors opened, and every chain fell off. And Paul and Silas did not leave. They stayed. And the man who was about to kill himself because he thought they had escaped, gave his life to God before morning. You are in a situation you did not choose and cannot control. The cell is real. The chains are real. The injustice that put you here is real. And the question is not whether this is fair, it is not. The question is what you do at midnight when the only thing left is what you choose to do with the hours between now and morning. Read that again. Part 1. They were not singing because the situation was good. Acts 16 verses 22 to 24. The crowd joined in the attack against Paul and Silas, and the magistrates ordered them to be stripped and beaten with rods. After they had been severely flogged, they were thrown into prison. The jailer put them in the inner cell and fastened their feet in the stocks. Severely flogged. Inner cell. Feet in the stocks. The Greek word for inner cell is to esoteron phylax, literally the innermost prison, the place furthest from the exit, reserved for the most dangerous or most hopeless cases. Paul and Silas were not there because they were dangerous. They were there because someone wanted to make sure they could not leave. The same God who would open the doors knew exactly where they were placed. The innermost cell was not hidden from him. It was the address he allowed. But here is what nobody told you. The midnight worship was not a strategy. It was a position, the position of two men who had already settled the question of whether God could be trusted with the worst version of the situation. The singing did not come from certainty about the outcome. It came from certainty about the character of the one being sung to. And that distinction, between singing to change your circumstances and singing because you know who God is regardless of your circumstances, is the difference the other prisoners heard at midnight. Part 2. The other prisoners were listening. Acts 16 verse 25. About midnight Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. About midnight. Not at dawn when hope was more available. Midnight. The hour when darkness is at its fullest. And they were not weeping quietly or enduring in silence. They were singing. Out loud. In the innermost cell. With their feet in the stocks and their backs still bleeding from the flogging. Now stop. Many of you will push back on this. Good. Because the text says the other prisoners were listening, before the earthquake, before the doors opened, before anything visible changed. The worship was broadcast into the entire prison. Every person in that building heard two men choose praise over complaint at midnight after a flogging. And that choice was already doing something in the building before the earthquake arrived. The earthquake did not begin the work. The singing did. Think about that for a second. Part 3. Every door opened. Every chain fell. Nobody ran. Acts 16 verse 26. Suddenly there was such a violent earthquake that the foundations of the prison were shaken. At once all the prison doors flew open, and everyone's chains came loose. All the prison doors. Not just Paul and Silas' cell. Every door. Every chain. The earthquake was not a targeted extraction. It was a complete structural event that affected the entire prison. And not one prisoner ran. The prisoners who had been listening to Paul and Silas sing at midnight, with no theological framework, no prior relationship with this God, they stayed. The midnight singing had already changed something in that building before the earthquake arrived. Let that land. Part 4. The most important decision of the night was not the singing. It was staying. Acts 16 verses 27 to 28. The jailer woke up, and when he saw the prison doors open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself because he thought the prisoners had escaped. But Paul shouted, "Don't harm yourself. We are all here. The jailer had one job. If the prisoners escaped, Roman law made him liable with his own life. He woke up to open doors and concluded the obvious: they were gone. He drew his sword. And Paul's voice stopped him. We are all here. Many of you will push back on this. Good. Because Paul and Silas had every right to leave. The doors were open. The chains were off. If there was ever a moment when an open door could be interpreted as divine permission, this was it. And Paul chose to stay. Not because he was afraid. Because the open door was not the point. The man standing outside with a sword was the point. Tell me in the comments, if you were Paul, with the doors open and the chains off, would you have stayed? Type amen if you are claiming this. That not every open door is an invitation to walk through it. Sometimes the open door is the context in which the real assignment becomes visible. Part 5. The question came from a man who had watched everything. Acts 16 verses 29 to 30. The jailer called for lights, rushed in and fell trembling before Paul and Silas. He then brought them out and asked, Sirs, what must I do to be saved? This was not a casual inquiry. This was the question of a man who had watched two people worship through a flogging, stay through an earthquake, and call out to protect him when they could have let him die. The sermon was the midnight singing. The altar call was the staying. The question did not come from a tract handed through prison bars. It came from a night spent watching something that could not be explained by human endurance alone. Part 6. By morning, an entire household had been baptized. Acts 16 verses 33 to 34. At that hour of the night the jailer took them and washed their wounds. Then immediately he and all his household were baptized. He was filled with joy because he had come to believe in God, he and his whole household. The man who had chained them at midnight was washing their wounds by dawn. The household that was sleeping while Paul and Silas sang was baptized before sunrise. The entire scope of what the midnight worship produced was not visible at midnight. It was visible by morning. Here is what Paul and Silas did not know when they started singing. They did not know about the earthquake. They did not know about the open doors. They did not know about the jailer standing outside with a sword. They did not know that staying would produce a question, that the question would produce a conversion, that the conversion would spread to an entire household before dawn. They sang because they knew something about God that the situation could not change. And everything else followed from that. You are at midnight. The situation is real. The chains are real. The cell is real. But midnight is not the end of the story. It is the hour when what you choose to do in the dark determines what happens at dawn. If you want to understand what it looks like when God gives you something and then asks whether you love the gift more than the giver, watch the video on screen now. A man raised a knife over the promise he had waited 25 years to receive. What he discovered in the middle of releasing it changed everything. Drop "I received this" in the comments if you are choosing today to sing at midnight, before the doors open, before the chains fall, before the morning comes.